What if I told you that some of the most feared slaves in the Caribbean were Muslims? What if I told you that colonial authorities specifically identified certain African Muslim groups as dangerous, rebellious, and difficult to control? Did you know that from Haiti to Brazil, from Jamaica to Trinidad, the fingerprints of Islamic resistance can be found throughout the history of slavery in the Americas? And what if I told you that many of those Muslims came from powerful African Islamic civilizations that most of us have probably never even heard about? This is the hidden history of Muslim resistance in the Caribbean. One of the greatest myths ever created is that the Africans brought to the Americas were a single people, but they weren't. Africa was not a single country. Africa contained hundreds of nations, kingdoms, cultures, and religions. Among them were powerful Muslim societies stretching across West Africa. Places like Futa Toro, Futa Jalon, or the Hausa states, Kanem Borno, the Mandinka kingdom, and the world of the Jollof Empire, or they called Wolof, or the Wolofs. These weren't primitive societies at all. They were organized states with scholars, judges, armies, traders, and big, huge universities. Many Africans captured and sold into slavery came from these Muslim societies. Historians estimate that up to 30% of the enslaved Africans brought to the Americas were Muslims. In some regions, and during certain periods of time, the percentage might have even been higher than that. Many of them read and write Arabic. Many had memorized portions of the Quran. Some were scholars. Some were military leaders, some were judges, and some were students. And many had lived under Islamic governments before being captured brutally by the Christian European colonial powers. This is one of the reasons why colonial authorities often viewed Muslim slaves differently from other enslaved Africans. The Christian European colonial powers understood that these men and women came from established civilizations in West Africa. They possessed literacy, organization, leadership, and a powerful religious identity, and in most cases, Muslim and Islamic identity. Now, one of the most feared groups in the early Caribbean were the Helofis. The Helofis were people from the Jollof or Wolof regions of Senegambia. They were Muslims. Many came from societies that had long histories of military organization and resistance. Spanish colonial records repeatedly mentioned the Helofis as rebellious and difficult to control. After the famous slave uprising on Hispaniola in 1522, one of the earliest major slave revolts in the Americas, colonial authorities became deeply concerned about importing large numbers of Senegambian Africans and in fact enacted legislation to ban the importation of slaves with Muslim background, origins, or even influenced by Muslims. Many historians have noted that Africans from these groups and these regions developed reputations for resistance throughout the Atlantic world. Whether Wolof or Fulani, Mandinka, or other Senegambian peoples, many carried with them traditions of political organization and Islamic identity that colonial authorities considered very dangerous. The colonizers wanted laborers, but what they got were people who remembered freedom. Let's understand something about resistance and liberation movements among the African slaves. Islam provided something unique. Islam gave enslaved Africans a worldview that slavery could not completely destroy. A Muslim slave could lose his home, he could lose his family, he could lose his wealth, and he will lose his freedom, but he still knew that Allah was his Lord and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was his prophet. No plantation owner could take that away from him. Islam also provided literacy. Many enslaved Muslims could write Arabic. They could communicate, record information, preserve knowledge, organize secretly, and maintain identity. And perhaps most importantly, Islam connected them to a global civilization far larger than the plantation. So while the slave master wanted these slaves to think that they were nothing, Islam reminded them that they belonged to a community stretching from West Africa to Arabia and beyond.